Ready to Flourish podcast. I am your host, Meg, and I'm sitting here with Yasmina. In this episode, we're going to be talking about all things pregnancy and postpartum.
Yes.
Very relevant in both of our lives.
Extremely.
I just had a letdown like a minute ago. I was cupping myself so I didn't leak through my shirt. You are probably feeling baby kicks throughout the episode.
Oh my gosh. And just
all the
pelvic
things.
floor things and all the
your
things. Oh
pubic
my gosh.
symphysis.
Oh, just
man.
My body.
Your body.
My body be hurting.
Yeah. Talk to me about your pregnancy. Like, how has this pregnancy been for you? How are you feeling today?
Yeah. Oh gosh. Okay. So this is my 4th pregnancy, 2nd unexpected pregnancy.
Oh, that's right.
And my 3rd of a back-to-back sequence of events that I have been in for 3
You
years.
just feel like you've been pregnant for forever.
I have been, basically. Because I have a 5 to 10 month gap in between both of my pregnancies. So my body's hurting, you know. As a thriving 36-year-old who's been pregnant and postpartum for 3 years, I am not feeling great. I actually just started going back to the chiropractor this week, and I'm really glad. I'm about 24, almost 25 weeks pregnant right now. So I'm glad I kind of got in as early as I could, just navigating all the kids. And it's like a situation. I'm like a storm when I walk into the chiropractor right now. Like, I'm just like all of my kids. And like,
it's such a scene.
There's a lot of sweat happening.
Oh,
yeah.
You know, my chiropractor office is basically like a giant play date.
Yeah,
like,
that's amazing.
Everyone just brings, it's so kid friendly.
That's awesome. So mine is too, but I just come in very huffing and puffing, just barely making it there. But so I'm definitely feeling sore. I'm definitely feeling limited physically, which is a hard feeling when you have a 2-year-old who loves to be held and carried and a 1-year-old who needs to be held and carried. I definitely am like, I think I'm at a point right now where I know that the next 2 months that I'm approaching, 2 to 3 months, are about to get really intense. And entering 3rd trimester, a lot of growth is going to be happening. And I'm on the floor a lot. You know, I like sit on the floor a lot with my kids, whether it's navigating emotions or changing a diaper or picking up something off the floor. And I do feel nervous mentally, just knowing I'm walking into a physically more taxing couple of months, feeling a little anxious about how that's going to feel and just wanting to feel good.
I know. And just like feeling like pregnancy for us both in different ways, but pregnancy is so limiting.
It is.
And like to have to like relearn how to do very basic things.
Yes.
Is so humbling.
Like I'm getting to the point where the last 2 pregnancies towards my 3rd trimester, I keep wishing I had one of those the
little
clipper things that like pick things off the floor, like pick trash off the floor.
We should get you one of those.
I think this might be the pregnancy where I get one of them.
Yes.
I think it needs to be
Can you just one day just like sweep all of your toys into one big pile for when Kim got home?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. And I started going, okay, everyone, I've brought everything together on the floor. Now pick it up and put it somewhere, you know?
Yes.
But I start, like 3rd trimester is when I start getting resentful every time I have to bend over.
Yeah.
There's like a resentment that comes into my heart and my body. I'm like, do you know how painful this is for me to just bend down to pick up this like one thing when like literally 3 other people could in this household? So I got to figure that out. I got to figure out what my system's going to be. But this pregnancy actually too is the most interesting for me, going into this pregnancy with some insulin resistance.
Oh, yeah.
So this is the first pregnancy where I had to get a call on the other side of my blood work that showed some A1C levels being a little high.
Should have worn your little patch.
Yeah, I am. So I am wearing I'm wearing a glucose monitor. And basically, I guess I'm being seen as gestational diabetes.
Are you technically in that range?
I don't fully know, but I feel like that's how I'm being treated. That's like how I'm being looked at. I think maybe I am.
How are your glucose levels?
So I just started tracking, excuse me. I just started tracking my glucose levels, and I definitely feel like they're within normal ranges, but I do notice that I spike. And when I spike, I do feel really bad. And so I'm like, okay, what is that? And if I'm eating low carb, it's better. But it's like the minute I get that higher carb or that sugar, it definitely spikes. And I'm feeling a more physical response than I've ever have. And that's a hard feeling to experience when you already feel so like kind of at the end of yourself physically and mentally and emotionally, where I'm in a season of just like, again, having a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old. Things are loud. And it's not like you can use your words fully because they're still learning how to do that. So it's a lot of like, you know?
I know. It's
It's
so
a lot of
loud.
whining and
Motherhood
crying.
is so loud. I have 3 fully verbal kids. We're in different loud phases. Like
Yes.
your loud phase is there's a lot of crying and noises. And my loud
Yes.
phase is I have three question machines
Mm,
pelting me all day long with like
mm,
questions.
mhm.
So my brain is interrupted a million times.
Yeah, yeah. So it's been interesting. You know, this pregnancy for me was very unexpected. I really thought after having our third Zion, it like I felt really complete and I felt really like we're moving on up,
We're done.
baby.
Yeah.
We're done. I'm coming back. I'm coming back. I'm coming out. Like this is it. And to
So
kind
dangerous
of
to be in that state.
I know.
So many of us have fallen
I
victim to
know.
that.
And so it's been a process to really come to terms and peace with knowing that I'm laying down my body and myself and my life in this season. And but I feel more at peace. I feel more days of excitement. I think being pregnant with a girl, I'm definitely experiencing a lot more hormonal just issues, like whether I feel numb or I feel wildly emotional. It's really all over the spectrum.
Estrogen.
Yeah,
Thank you,
estrogen, man.
estrogen. Yeah.
And so I feel like this I feel the most disconnected to my emotions during this pregnancy. I have a lot of thoughts, but it's just connecting to how I feel has been harder. But all around, I feel more peaceful.
Yeah.
I think in my last couple of pregnancies, there were a lot of external stressors in my world that brought a lot of weightiness to those pregnancies and a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety. And those things are not really prevalent in this pregnancy. And that I'm very grateful for.
Yeah, me too.
Me too.
I also feel like even though you're not able to be there for yourself and your baby emotionally as much as you want to be,
Yes.
like this is where we really get to choose to like just like trust that the Lord has this.
Totally.
And not in like a cliche way, but in the real way of, I really believe that God can cover this area because it's honestly it's outside the realm of your control.
100%.
And there's like such a surrender piece to
100%.
pregnancy and postpartum. And it starts in pregnancy of just being like, I really can't fully control what's going on in my world.
Totally. The song that's been coming to my mind and my spirit, honestly, as I lay awoken at night from my other
Pregnancy
babies and
insomnia?
children. No, right now it's my other babies.
Yeah.
I just want to sleep. My
Yeah.
body just wants to sleep. And watch, they're going to start sleeping through the night while I go through pregnancy. It's just like pregnancy insomnia. Like, why, God, why? But the song that's been going through my head is, Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Because honestly, that's all I have. That's all the words I have. That's it. Like, Lord, I need you. I know I'm not going to be able to do this without you. I know I need your grace. I know I need your mercy. And just trying to surrender to that process. But even the surrendering to accepting that, okay, this is going to be my life. I'm going to do this again.
Which I think so many women can relate with.
Yeah.
Because like we all like to act like everything's planned out, but so many of us have gotten pregnant unexpectedly.
Yeah.
Or not gotten pregnant unexpectedly.
Right. And the emotional journey of that.
That's intense. Yeah.
It is intense. And I think it's good to talk about it. I think it's good to be honest about it. I wish I was that woman who just felt wildly excited about the process. But I think I know that I'm a little bit more in my flesh, and in my natural disposition is more self-oriented. And so when I know I'm walking into something that literally requires me to die to myself, I mourn that. I grieve that process.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
I think a lot of women feel a lot of shame, or they try to hide that.
Yes.
And it's actually okay to be like, yeah, I'm grieving the fact that like my sleep is not my own. My body is not my own. My energy is not my own anymore. Like that's actually hard.
It's true. It's true. About, gosh, almost somewhere in between first and second trimester, maybe I was like 16 weeks, I don't know. I remember just like sitting in worship and the Lord just being like, Lord, okay, I know I've like really been in a state of grieving and mourning and just afraid and nervous and all of these things. And just bringing that to him and allowing him to speak into that is so powerful.
Right.
And he showed me this really beautiful picture of my future. It was like this quick flash of me and my 4 children, and that this 4th one was going to be like a gift to me. Like there's something really special about her for me.
Wow.
And I heard him say like, she's going to be a gift to you. And it was just this moment of, okay, God, thank you.
Wow.
You know, thank you. And again, going back to, you know what I need. And you want to gift me with her for something that I don't even understand yet. Like my future will thank God
Oh, yeah.
for this fourth child.
Oh, yeah.
And that brought so much peace and acceptance to my heart. And now I just have to navigate through my own self-orientation and flesh and just, the things, the details that come with it. But yeah, so that's my honest answer. I wish I could be like, oh, I'm so excited.
No, I feel like it's just, I hear that way more often than not.
Yeah.
I think sometimes people feel surprised. You and I are both like really positive, energetic, like high energy people. So I think it's sometimes surprising people to be like, oh, wow, you struggle. Like for me, and I hate even uttering these words, I can't stand being pregnant. I can't.
Yeah, you have had very difficult pregnancies.
Yes. Like nausea and vomiting the whole way through. Tons, like this time around, tons of body aches and pains. Problems with my feet, like not being able to be active, not being able to walk. Like I feel like I'm a shell of myself when I'm pregnant.
It was really hard to see you pregnant this time around. I'm not going to lie. That was really hard.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, you're really struggling here. And I've never seen you struggle that much before.
I feel like it was probably one of my hardest ones.
Yeah.
Besides my first and my last. And what's so crazy is that I know that I'm going to probably do it again. Even though it's so hard.
Yeah.
Like it actually gives me children.
Yeah.
Which have been so challenging but rewarding. Like you talking about having a fourth. I just think of Meadow, honestly, like right away. And I'm like, she has been such a gift. Like everything about her has been such a gift. Like I'm like beaming over her. And I know that's not everyone's like postpartum experience.
Yeah.
And it hasn't always been mine.
Yeah.
I had very different postpartum experiences based on like what kid, and you've seen me in different postpartum worlds too. But like this last one, like I didn't know that postpartum could be so enjoyable. I feel like there was just such a level of surrender that I was already living in.
Yeah.
And like I learned how to communicate my needs and like just nourish my body. There was all these things, all these factors that came in that just helped my postpartum be so good that I was like, whoa, I didn't know that it could be this good, you know?
Yeah. Something that we were just discussing the other day that I'm like really proud of you for going into knowing that like you want to do it again.
Yeah.
That you want another, is that prior to getting pregnant to Meadow, you were really concerned about how pregnancy was going to go. Like you were really concerned about how you were going to feel. You were really resistant of knowing that you were going to endure like tremendous sickness. And you really wanted the Lord to remove that from your story.
Yeah.
And had a lot of, just like fear. And then when you got pregnant with her and then you started feeling sick, you had to navigate through the disappointment. And that it was hard. I vowed, wow, I really, that was painful to watch you as a friend suffer every day. But as you talk about your next one, like you have surrendered to that process now.
Yeah, I really have.
And I'm really proud of you.
Oh, thank you.
I'm really proud of you because again, such a difference from 2 years ago when you were like, how can I kind of to, you know, it is what it is. I'm going to be sick and then I'm going to get I'm going to get my baby and I'm going to figure it out. And I'm really proud of you for surrendering that piece to the Lord when it's going to bring you, like you said, a beautiful gift.
To
your family.
It's funny. I know that like I've shared about HG, like hyperemesis a lot on my like Instagram, like here and there. But I feel like for a lot of HG moms who have just dealt with like extreme illness, there is so much like fear and trepidation and like thinking about like, entering another season like that.
Yeah.
And I really understand that. And oh gosh, like I still, you know, like the pain of childbirth has faded for me already.
Totally.
The pain of pregnancy is very fresh in my brain. I know that I'm gonna need some time to just rebuild, honestly, like connections with my kids. Cause I just like, I'm so tapped out when I'm pregnant, even postpartum tapped out. But I feel like surviving an HG pregnancy now, like for a third time, because I would say that with my son, even though I was like nauseous and I did vomit with him, like
very different.
It was very different. Like that only lasted about 4 months. It might be a lot to some people, but for me, that was like
that was amazing.
Mercy, such mercy.
Yeah.
But I like after surviving Meadows, I'm like, yeah, but I survived.
Yeah.
There's almost this like survivor bias that I have where I'm just like, but I did survive, and Meadow was such a gift that like I want to do it again. I could see myself having multiple pregnancies, and just being like, I made it through that hellish pregnancy. How much worse can it really get?
Yeah. I feel like you have now seen this as you would see like a mountain climbing challenge or a breastfeeding challenge. Like you are not someone who steers away from physical challenge.
Yeah.
I am. You are not. And I think it's cool that you've now been able to see that and you've been able to put it in that category for you because you have tremendous strength and endurance for that, for physical challenge like that. So I'm excited for you and what that's going to look like.
Thank you. I know it's funny when you said that, like the categories, like I'm very categorical.
Yes. Yeah,
like,
I know.
Patterns and things. And I remember my mom, I've told you this before, I was like day 3 or 4 in bed with Meadow, and Meadow was just, I've had so much breastfeeding issues, which we can talk about later, but I feel like I've experienced nearly anything you can experience with breastfeeding. And she's like not nursing well, and I'm crying, and I'm just like, I just didn't want this story for her. I didn't want to do this again. I didn't want to do all this again. And my mom just like stopped and looked at me, and it's okay if it's hard in the beginning. This will not be hard forever, but it's okay that it's hard right now.
Yeah.
There was something in my brain that was telling me it's not okay that this is hard.
Right. It shouldn't be this way.
It shouldn't be this way. And because
it's the optimist in us.
Yes.
Dang.
And because of like hormones on top of it,
for sure,
it clouds logic, which like for me, when my logic is clouded, I don't have very strong muscles in anxiety and fear because I'm not operating that a lot. So when I'm feeling anxious, I don't feel like I have a lot of coping mechanisms to like steer me out. I'm just in it. Right. So my mom being like, it's okay that it's hard.
Yeah.
I was like, it's okay that it's hard. I thought about that for 24 hours.
Wow.
And that just like broke something off of me to be like, everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what I want to tell a lot of like first time moms who are entering into postpartum, is that it's okay if it's hard. Nothing is forever.
Yep. Like
breastfeed, like your nipples hurting originally, that's not going to be forever. Like your ab separation, that's actually fixable. Like all of these things that I feel like really like the toll it takes on your marriage, that's actually healable. Like all of these things, like it's not going to last forever.
Yeah.
And it's okay if it's hard. Hard isn't bad.
Totally.
Hard doesn't mean you've done something wrong.
Right.
Hard doesn't mean that you could have done something better. Like sometimes yes, but not always. And yeah, like I think we talked about this. We always bring up this word like surrender is like the theme of like pregnancy and postpartum. I feel like for both of us is like surrendering what we thought it was going to be, what we were hoping it was going to be.
Totally. And
being like, all right, God, what's the lesson here? Like, what are you doing? What's your story with this child? What's your story with this baby?
Totally. And how can I trust you more? How can I see your kindness in this more?
Yes.
I think there's so many different avenues I could go into this, but just thinking about pain and struggle and like hard things, like I think just being in a season where we're helping toddlers like lean into pain, right? And lean into struggle. Like they're realizing like not everything is butterflies and rainbows.
Yeah.
And I'm having to teach my oldest Zara like how to embrace pain and endure it and not resist it.
Right.
And just realizing like God uses pain and struggle and hard stuff, challenges to grow you, right?
Yeah.
Like there's that scripture that we rejoice in our sufferings because it produces perseverance, character, and
hope.
Character,
which
hope.
is poured out by the Holy Spirit.
Right.
Yeah.
So Romans 8, I think that's Romans 8 or
it's
Romans
5:3.
5:3.
Yeah.
You're right. Romans 5:3. And I love that. I have perseverance tattooed on me because I just really relate to that cycle. We rejoice in our sufferings because it produces perseverance, character, and hope. And that is the means to growth. That is the means to breakthrough and strength.
It's
is literally persevering through hard things and pain.
I love that like analogy. Like, the Bible always uses the analogy of like agriculture. Like
me
to
too.
talk about the gospel, right?
I'm not a gardener, but me too.
Yes.
I thank you, Jesus.
Yes, I know. And I'm a gardener, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, I know that in order for a plant to grow, the seed has to basically like die and has to be like split open. And then like all these things have to happen in order to be able to get from what's inside the seed out to the earth. And even like with like pruning or winter.
Yeah.
It's like in order for this plant to grow, it has to die. It has to have a winter for the spring to come. It's like God built resurrection into the theme of the earth.
Yeah.
And it's just constantly like being revealed to me about how these like minor deaths or sometimes major deaths to ourselves are like the catalyst for life and are the catalyst for growth. But it's so hard to see it when you're in it. And this is why community is so important, because hopefully sometimes we've been in the same season of death where we're both just like withering. We've been there. But a lot of times other people aren't in that season and they can be your reminder and your sounding board and being like, hey, this isn't going to last forever.
Totally.
God has good things for you. God has a plan for you. God has not abandoned you. Like you do not need to be scared. Like this is why community matters so much. You cannot, like the Christian life, the wholehearted life is, you can't do it without others. You
100%.
can't do that without the body.
100%. Yeah, I think, again, going back to what we're doing here and just the reality that I know if I've had to make a decision that seems not the popular decision or not like the most ideal decision, but when I've heard someone else has also made that decision, it's okay.
Like
I'm
pumping?
okay. Yeah, like when I decided to exclusively pump and bottle feed Zion, and even just talking to that mama a minute ago, and I could see in her body and in her eyes and her heart, like, oh, you did it too. It's okay.
It's okay. Yeah.
And yeah, just I think there's so much power in knowing like you're not alone in the decisions and in the process or in the struggle that you have in. But I was thinking when you're just talking about like how God shows us through this picture of agriculture that it's through death, right? And even through Christ, obviously we saw like through death came wholeness, came salvation, came everything. The same thing happens with us as Christians, but even as women and as moms, that we get to actually experience like in our bodies this like true physical death. I think that's why it brings even like laboring with Christ, right? Into the laboring process. Like we get to actually literally understand what it means at a physical level, what Christ endured physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally when he was on earth, that we get to like partner with that. And that's one thing I've, in my first two labors, my first two births, I really tried to connect with that process as I was laboring, that like I'm co-laboring with Christ in this process of birth, you know.
Jesus doula,
baby, you know. It's so true. And I think like that mentality, thinking about it in that way helped me a lot, right? Same. My first two births were vaginal births. Was Zara.
Not just vaginal, but natural. Like you were on Pitocin with Zara. You didn't even get an epidural.
I know. That's
hardcore.
That's a high five moment. I was high fiving the nurses down the hallway. They would come in and they'd be like, do you want any ibuprofen? I was like, no, honey. And they're like, what? And I'm like, I know, give me a high five. Like literally, like I was so proud of myself. I was like, I am superwoman.
Yes.
And yeah, so I had Pitocin with her, but I was able to have her without an epidural, vaginally, super beautiful birth. And Eliana, my second, got to have her in the water. I mean, you were there. Yes. You were.
Oh, it was amazing.
You were there.
I felt your bones shifting in my hands as I was doing counter pressure.
Wild.
I felt your pelvis bones shifting. I remember looking at your midwife and being like, oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
You also scooped out my poop out of the water for me. I will never forget that.
Same from you.
This is a real ride or die here.
My poop.
Oh my God. I love that you have that medical bend though. So I know it wasn't like that big of a deal to you as it would have been for me, but just these really beautiful births that I got to endure that process with the Lord. But then Zion, I was planning on having a home birth, and long story short, ended up having a C-section, emergency C-section.
After 3 days.
After 3 days of trying.
Like on and off labor for you. Water broke, bad position, no contractions. And then finally, it was almost like your worst case scenario came to life.
100%.
Where you were like, you thought it was your worst case scenario. It was like, I have to be in a hospital now. I have to be on Pitocin. But actually,
no,
there was another layer to the worst case scenario. And that was, you have gone all of this way up to this point, and now we feel a cord, and there's a potential prolapse.
Yes.
And now we have to C-section you.
Yes.
Which is honestly like, besides the decline of a baby's health, which obviously is like our worst case 100%. Scenario for real. This was just like the worst case birth scenario where we were like, not only am I in a hospital doing all these things, but now I've done all of the work to get to this point, and I'm going to have to go back and do a surgery. And I have, how many minutes do you have to prepare? 10 minutes? 5 minutes?
100% 10 minutes. Yeah.
You like sent us a text and you were in surgery.
100%. Very scary.
Oof. Traumatic. I mean, truly.
Very traumatic.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think when you don't expect like home birth to C-section, that's a very huge jump. And that whole process you kind of become like this, like, you feel like you're like this like item on a table. And it's I felt, I kind of had to tap out of that laboring process with the Lord. I was not prepared to labor with the Lord in that kind of scenario, you know.
Not that he wasn't there, but it's hard to not disassociate when you're going through that level of
shock,
disappointment
and disappointment, total shock.
And honestly, just what happens is like, really, when you're in those situations, you're now being told you have zero control now.
Yes.
And now us surgeons,
we're in control. Exactly.
And it needed to happen, but it's just like, that is disorienting. To the highest degree, it's so disorienting.
100%. 100%. Yeah. And so I can't say there are many times in my life where I felt the physical experience of disassociation happen.
Like hovering.
Yeah, but that was definitely one of them. Like when I entered the OR room, I guess that's what it's called. And it's like super bright, white, cold, sterile room. And my husband can't be in there because they have to put this giant shot in my back. That was like more painful.
At least in my opinion.
100 times more painful than natural labor.
Yeah. Did they miss and have to pull it out and redo it?
No, thank God. Because I think I actually would have freaked out.
they like missed a few times.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and then there was like blood in the catheter. They had to pull it out and restart all over again.
Oh no, I'm so sorry.
I was biting.
Because you had that with Flora, right? You had an epidural. I would take a natural birth over an epidural 100 times.
Yeah.
That sucked for me. But then, yeah, just the whole process of just being like really out of it and on a lot of drugs and not being able to connect with Zion. And that was really hard. But one of the things that Akeem and I had to really process through that experience was days before his birth, we had gotten his middle name, which was Victory. Zion Victory. And we came out of this surgery and that whole experience, that whole 3 or 4 days of just like unexpected, like labor taking on a little bit early and not progressing, and then having to go to the hospital and thinking we're just getting Pitocin, and then it becomes a C-section. We kind of like sat there, we're like, well, this did not feel like victorious.
Yeah.
And we had to wrestle with the definition and the expectation of what it meant for his life and that birth experience and that week to be victorious.
This is such a good thing that I want to talk about really fast. If you would have bypassed the process of wrestling, the enemy would have stolen from you and Akeem.
100%. 100%.
Like that would have been, that is a moment where you get to choose, I'm going to tap out. This is too hard. This is too much. God, I'm mad at you. I'm disappointed.
Totally.
That sucked.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Hard heart.
Or a moment where you're like, I feel upset still. I feel disappointed still. I'm still maybe upset or angry with you, God, but I'm going to choose to wrestle. Because if you miss out on that part of it, the enemy just gets such a strong, it gets a foothold.
It's true. It's 100% true. And I knew like when we were in the hospital, it's just too much to process, right? Like you're still, people are coming and pushing and prodding.
There's no processing.
Yeah. And you're just like, this bed sucks. Like everything here is very uncomfortable for me. When I got home, I remember just crying. And looking at myself in the mirror and just being like, what just happened to me? I think when you get to have a natural labor, there is this experience of, I did this with the Lord. But the surgery was like, something just happened to me. And I didn't get to connect with that process. And I feel like almost violated. There was like a violation to my body. Like, I mean, I had to get completely cut open and he was like wrapped. It was crazy what his position. But I remember just like, getting in my warm bed and just getting really comfortable and just thinking, okay, if I don't hear from God how he sees this situation, I'm not going to be okay.
Yeah.
Like I need God's perspective.
Yeah.
Like,
it's actually a necessity.
It is like for my heart and for this postpartum and for like, you know, and between me and the Lord, because that's the kind of stuff, just like you said, it separates, it disconnects your heart from the Father's heart. And that is exactly what the enemy wants. And so that's why wholeness and wholehearted living is like leaning in. We just got to keep leaning into these things.
The enemy wants to separate us
100%.
From the intentions in the heart of God so much.
He's been doing that since the beginning of time.
Literally from the garden. That was his line.
Exactly. And I remember just like getting out my notebook. My girls were still with my mom. So we had a quiet home. It was glorious. And newborns, they just sleep. So it was beautiful. And I just remember asking the Lord, tell me what you saw. Tell me what you see. What do you want me to know about this situation? And he began to show me his definition of how victorious this birth actually was. Wow. Because we had Zion and he was healthy and he was whole. And no one could have told me that was enough except for God for me to really feel that peace.
No encouragement or like mother can replace the actual voice of the Father.
100%. It would have felt almost insensitive if someone else said, but you know what? He's here.
Yeah.
Like I needed to hear that from God first. And getting God's perspective on, hey, I need you to trust. Like he just fully was like, I need you to trust that this was protection and provision, that this was victorious. And you're not going to know all the answers, which is hard because I'm solution oriented and I want to know what could I have done differently? Is there something I could have done differently, you know?
Always.
Always.
But I also feel like you really understand the tension that all of us believers have to sit in. We talked about this extensively on your birthday weekend a few weeks ago. There's this tension of God does not orchestrate pain.
Right.
God does not orchestrate C-sections. Right. Like that's not like, he's not like, you know what, this is going to be your story. Because he's good.
Yeah.
He's all loving. He's good. But we are separated from perfection because we're living in a fallen world. And so there's this understanding of, I trust you, Lord, that you promise me you can turn this around for my good. And you promise me that you're here with me. And you promise me that you'll never leave me or forsake me and that you love me. But this is hard. And I feel like, yeah, like this wasn't necessarily your plan for me, even though I know you're going to work it out for my good.
Right. Like still finding God's kindness and his love, because he is so loving. And if you look for it, you will find his love and his kindness and his mercy. And like, again, another scripture that speaks to that. Like, he works good through all things for those who love him. And it's true. Like, and that working good doesn't necessarily mean results. It doesn't necessarily mean reward. It means his kindness. What did happen that was actually from a place of protection or provision from the Lord.
So good to mention that, because I think that is a really hard thing for most believers, me included.
Totally.
And we talked about this. We have a friend who recently found out that her baby has a club foot. And just like standing with her in faith, standing with her in grieving, standing with her in questioning, all those things. And I remember we were doing some inner healing with her. Yeah. And she repented for praying for her faith being dependent on, what's the R word?
Results. Yeah.
Being result oriented. Yeah. And that's really hard as humans.
Absolutely.
Because that's how we treat other humans. Like the results are who they are. But like with the Lord, we're not living in a perfect world. We're not living in the Garden of Eden with him, which is what he created us for. He created us for the garden. And we're living outside the Garden of Eden right now. Yeah. And so it's like hard to be like, you are not a summation of the results of my prayers. You are actually like all knowing, all loving. Yeah. Even if these results don't happen.
Yeah, 100%.
And my faith cannot be contingent on results.
100%.
Because as you're talking about still finding God's like provision and kindness and all those things, like what would you tell, like what have you told women who have had stillbirth, had miscarriages, infertility?
Oh, I know that's a really big question. I feel like I needed preparation for.
I can tell you that. Well, no, go ahead, Sohan.
I deeply like empathize with women who like have had to go through something like that. I can't even comprehend like what kind of pain that must be. The only thing I can say is that knowing and trusting in the character and the nature of God, that he has you and that he is carrying you and carrying your baby in the palm of his hand, and that he understands the reasons for things more than we will ever understand, can be the only true source of hope. Yeah. There are things that like we might never get the answers on, that might never make sense. But if we can trust that like he does know those answers and he did understand the details, and it is like part of just what he, again, trusting that like somehow that great loss and that great pain was part of a protection and provision moment. Like those babies get to be with him in heaven. Maybe your body couldn't handle something. Like there are things that like are unknown.
The mysteries.
There's the
of God.
mysteries.
Yeah, and I would even say like, and I know like we like shared this last podcast, but there's like things that you and I have different perspectives on.
Yeah, totally.
And like different like beliefs on. And I love that about like our friendship, that we can talk openly about that, because I look at pregnancy, loss, infertility, miscarriages, and like my perspective on like where were you at, God, in that moment is like my brain always goes to the story of Lazarus. Always. I was just listening to this like podcast with my kids. There's just like I needed to find out the name. I think it's like Bible Stories podcast. But it's made for kids, and it was talking about the story of Lazarus. And it was talking about how when Mary and Martha reached out to Jesus to let him know that Lazarus was sick, that like Jesus stayed, I think, in Bethany for another few days before he traveled back to visit Lazarus, which is kind of confusing. Yeah. And then he shows up, and what happens? Lazarus is dead. And what Jesus enters into in that moment isn't a preaching role. It isn't a teaching role. It isn't let me do this so that like you guys, he wept.
Yeah.
Like it's the shortest verse in the Bible, right? Jesus wept. And he mourned because I think that death breaks God's heart. I think death breaks Jesus' heart. And I see like the suffering of death as an area to like fellowship with Jesus because he hates it too. And it breaks his heart too.
It's really good, Meg.
And I just like, I always go back to that. Like he actually knew that he was going to resurrect Lazarus.
Yeah. Yeah.
He knew what the end of the story was, and he still entered into grief, you know? So I just feel like whenever I'm talking, I actually had a mom the other day. I haven't shared this with you yet, but I had a mom the other day. This is a crazy story. She criticized one of my posts in a pretty harsh way through sarcasm, which you know about me. Like I'm not sarcastic. So I sometimes think that I don't know how to process it.
Same.
I thought that she was being literal, but she was actually being sarcastic. And so when I responded, she responded even harsher because I put a little laughing face.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh my gosh. So I DM'd her and I was like, hey, I think I misread your comment.
Yeah.
And I think you were actually meaning to be unkind, but I thought you were meaning to be sarcastic.
Oh, wow.
And I just wanted to ask you personally, is everything okay?
Right.
And she responded to me with this huge paragraph about how her last baby, her fourth born, it was a free birth at home, died in her arms.
Oh,
I know. It like broke my heart. This is actually months. Like she did CPR for like 15 minutes and like resurrected her baby. And then a few months later, her baby dad had a heart condition and died later in her. So like heartbreaking, right? Like, what do I do with that? I'm like sitting there, I'm DMing with this woman who just low-key insulted me. And now I'm like seeing her baby. I of course go to her page and I'm like, I'm watching every single reel and video and I'm crying. I'm just like sitting there crying. Like, I do not know what to tell you except for the fact that the Lord did not orchestrate this to happen. Your baby was never meant to die. Yeah. Your baby was actually created for the Garden of Eden. You were created for the Garden of Eden. Yeah. And this breaks his heart. Yeah. Jesus is interceding on your behalf right now for the Father. Yeah. And that's like all I could say. I'm like, I'll never be able to understand your pain, but I know that this is breaking the Lord's heart too. Yeah. I'm so sorry.
Good. So good.
Yeah.
I think that, and I think this is where I often feel with a lot of like your perspective versus my perspective. I think it can be like both and even what I said earlier, I never meant to indicate that God would ordain the death of a baby or anything like that. But I think what I was trying to speak to is like, where does your heart eventually need to go? Yeah. And it's, do I trust the ultimate, my creator? But in that, I absolutely believe and am so grateful for the compassion and the empathy of God, that he sits with us like in our grief, in our pain. He does not expect us to toughen up, buttercup. Right. He literally sits with us in that. And that, I think discovering that about the Lord when I did years ago just really changed my ability to feel safe with him. It's like, oh, he actually makes space for my grief. He makes space for the pain. He makes space. And I think in Christian culture, there can be this like belief that if we feel pain or disappointment or hurt towards God or like a situation that like we're wrong and we need to push it down and get it away. But it's to me, what I feel like I've experienced with the Lord and what I've seen in his word is that like he sits, he mourns, he is a friend. Like Jesus was like the greatest example of being such a human form of God's heart and in the grief and in the friendship and in the celebration and that, he mourns. I agree. He grieves and mourns. But it is really interesting navigating our hearts with the Lord through disappointment and suffering and pain. Like I can't even, when it comes to that realm, there's been a lot of stuff out there in this pregnancy. A part of something I've had to like really protect is seeing that there's been a lot of stuff out there, like stillbirths and like just crazy, just really terrible things happening in birth, like in pregnancies this past year. And I've had to really protect my heart and protect my mind.
Once again, like that ultimate surrender of I actually am not in control of life and death.